Samuel Simmons froze as the alien female's request hit him like a shock grenade. "We wish to examine what's between your legs, human," the lead alien chirped, her iridescent antenna twitching with curiosity. Standing at attention on the dusty outskirts of Earth's military outpost on Zeta 9, Private Simmons struggled to maintain his composure. The distant red sun cast an eerie glow across the barren landscape, highlighting the bizarre situation unfolding before him. His routine perimeter check had suddenly become anything but routine. Earth's recent victory over the Ullian Empire in a minor skirmish had secured humanity's control over a strategically vital star system. Now, soldiers like Simmons found themselves walking a razor's edge between projecting strength and fostering positive relations with their newly subjugated alien neighbors. The cultural exchange program, allowing limited Ullian access to the human base, was meant to ease tensions. Instead, it had led to this surreal moment. 3 Ullian females, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming, openly requesting to inspect a human soldier's genitals. Simmons's mind raced. His training hadn't prepared him for this. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could utter a word, a booming voice cut through the air. "Cease this inappropriate behavior at once." A larger Ullian, adorned with ornate markings denoting high rank, strode toward the group. The females immediately backed away, lowering their eye stalks in deference. "I am Xenos, senior diplomat of the Ullian Empire," the newcomer announced, turning to face Simmons. "I offer my deepest apologies for this unseemly display." Xenos explained that Ullian females possessed a biological drive to seek genetic diversity, sometimes manifesting as invasive curiosity towards other species. The diplomat's compound eyes studied Simmons intently, clearly intrigued by the human's reaction. As Xenos escorted the chastened females away, Simmons felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. He knew this incident would not go unnoticed. Already he could see fellow soldiers in the distance, pointing and whispering. The comm unit on Simmons's wrist crackled to life. "Private Simmons, report to my office immediately," Colonel Hawkins's voice barked. "We need to discuss this encounter." Simmons swallowed hard. The fragile peace between humans and Ullians hung in the balance, and somehow he'd found himself at the center of it all. As he trudged back to base, the weight of potential diplomatic fallout pressed down on him. Behind him, Xenos watched the human's retreating form with newfound fascination. This strange creature's response to the female's request had sparked an intense interest in human culture and physiology. The diplomat's mandibles clicked thoughtfully, already formulating plans for future interactions. Inside the command center, Colonel Hawkins paced anxiously. The brass on Earth would need to be informed. But how to explain this bizarre incident without jeopardizing the tenuous alliance they'd fought so hard to establish? As Simmons approached the colonel's office, he steeled himself for the debriefing to come. One thing was certain. His encounter with the Ullian females had set in motion events that could reshape the future of human-alien relations. And it all started with a shockingly direct question about what lay hidden beneath his standard-issue fatigues. Simmons took a deep breath and knocked on Colonel Hawkins's office door. The muffled "enter" from within did little to calm his nerves. "Private Simmons reporting as ordered, sir," he announced, standing at attention. Colonel Hawkins, a stern-faced man with graying temples, looked up from his desk. "At ease, Private. Take a seat." As Simmons settled into the chair, the colonel's piercing gaze seemed to bore right through him. "I've received a rather interesting report about your encounter with some Ullian civilians. Care to explain?" Simmons recounted the incident, his face flushing as he described the female's request. When he finished, the colonel leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Well, Private, it seems you've inadvertently become our resident Ullian expert," Hawkins said, a hint of dry humor in his voice. "As such, I'm assigning you to a new joint human-Ullian cultural exchange program. Your partner will be the Ullian diplomat, Xenos." Simmons blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "You heard me, Simmons. Your first task is to collaborate on designing a shared recreational space for the base. We need to accommodate both human and Ullian physiological needs. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir," Simmons replied, his mind already racing with the implications of this assignment. The next day, Simmons found himself face-to-face with Xenos in a large empty room designated for the new rec space. The Ulian's compound eyes studied him intently. "Greetings, Private Simmons," Xenos chirped, mandibles clicking. "I trust we can move past our initial encounter and work together productively?" Simmons nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, Xenos. Let's get started." As they pored over blueprints and discussed design elements, Xenos peppered Simmons with questions about human culture. The Ulian seemed particularly fascinated by Earth customs related to courtship and reproduction. "So humans engage in elaborate rituals before mating?" Xenos asked, antennae twitching with curiosity. "Fascinating. And these dates serve what purpose exactly?" Simmons felt his face grow hot. "Well, it's about getting to know each other, seeing if you're compatible," he explained, trying to keep his voice steady. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Marcus Hayes and a group of human soldiers. Hayes, a burly man with a perpetual scowl, took one look at Xenos and sneered. Well, if it isn't our new bug buddies," Hayes drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. "Tell me, Private, you enjoying playing architect with the roaches?" Simmons felt a surge of anger. He glanced at Xenos, noting the diplomat's rigid posture and the way his eye stalks had drawn back slightly. Before he could second-guess himself, Simmons spoke up. "With all due respect, Sergeant, Xenos is a diplomatic representative of the Ulian Empire. I'd appreciate it if you'd address him with the proper respect." A tense silence fell over the room. Hayes's face darkened, but before he could respond, Colonel Hawkins strode in. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" the colonel asked, his tone deceptively calm. Hayes snapped to attention. "No, sir, just welcoming our allies." Hawkins's eyes narrowed. "I see. Well, consider this your official notice. All personnel are now required to attend mandatory sensitivity training. Private Simmons, you'll be assisting in developing this program. Work with Xenos and the Ulian Cultural Attaché, Lyra." As the soldiers filed out, Xenos turned to Simmons. "Thank you for your intervention, Private. It was unexpected." Simmons nodded, still processing the encounter. "It was the right thing to do." Over the next few weeks, Simmons found himself spending more time with the Ulians, particularly Lyra, the cultural attaché. She was unlike any being he had ever encountered. Her iridescent exoskeleton seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and her movements were graceful despite her alien physiology. As they worked on the sensitivity training program, Simmons found himself drawn to Lyra's quick wit and insightful observations about human behavior. He began to see past her alien features, noticing the subtle ways she expressed emotion through the movement of her antennae or the positioning of her eye stalks. One evening, as they were wrapping up a particularly productive session, Lyra's demeanor suddenly changed. Her antennae drooped, and she seemed to curl in on herself. "Samuel," she said, using his first name for the first time, "there's something I need to tell you." Simmons leaned forward, concern etched on his face. "What is it, Lyra?" She hesitated, her compound eyes darting around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "There have been developments within the Ulian government. A radical faction is pushing for renewed conflict with humans. They're mobilizing military forces near the contested star system." Simmons felt his blood run cold. "Are you sure?" Lyra nodded, her exoskeleton seeming to lose some of its luster. "I have reliable sources. But Samuel, you must understand, the majority of my people don't want war. This faction is acting against the will of most Ulians." As Lyra continued to share details of the Ulian military movements, Simmons found himself torn. His duty as a soldier demanded he report this information immediately, but doing so would betray Lyra's trust and potentially derail the fragile peace they'd been working to build. Before he could decide on a course of action, alarms blared throughout the base. Colonel Hawkins's voice came over the intercom. "All personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Simmons locked eyes with Lyra, seeing his own fear and uncertainty reflected in her alien features. As he rose to respond to the alarm, he realized that the choices he made in the coming hours could shape the future of human-Ulian relations forever. The klaxons continued to wail as Simmons rushed from the room, leaving Lyra behind. His mind raced with the weight of her revelation and the implications of the unfolding crisis. Whatever came next, he knew his perspective on the Ullians and his place in this interstellar conflict had been irrevocably changed. As the alarms blared throughout the base, Simmons cast one last conflicted glance at Lyra before sprinting toward his assigned station. The corridors buzzed with frantic activity as soldiers rushed to their posts, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. Simmons had barely reached his position when Colonel Hawkins's voice crackled over the comm system again. "Private Simmons, report to Hangar Bay 3 immediately. You're being reassigned." Heart pounding, Simmons changed course. He arrived at the hangar to find it a hive of activity, ground crews prepping ships for launch. Colonel Hawkins stood beside a sleek, dark vessel unlike anything Simmons had seen before. "Private," Hawkins said, his voice low and urgent. "We've received intel suggesting Ullian military mobilization near the contested star system. I need eyes on the situation, and you're our best option given your recent experiences." Simmons's mind reeled. "Sir, This is a stealth recon mission, Simmons. You'll be piloting this prototype shuttle equipped with our most advanced cloaking technology. Get in, gather intel, get out. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Simmons replied, pushing aside his doubts. As he climbed aboard the shuttle, Simmons couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The mission brief flashed across the cockpit displays as he strapped in. With a deep breath, he initiated the launch sequence. The shuttle slipped out of the hangar like a shadow, its cloaking field rendering it nearly invisible against the starry backdrop. Simmons set course for the coordinates provided, his mind racing with the implications of Lyra's earlier warning. Hours passed as Simmons navigated through unfamiliar star systems, constantly checking his sensors for signs of Ullian patrols. He was deep in Ullian space when disaster struck. A brilliant flash lit up his view screen as the shuttle plowed into an unexpected meteor shower. Alarms blared, and Simmons fought to maintain control as the ship bucked and shuddered. "Damage report," he barked at the onboard computer. "Cloaking field compromised," the AI responded. "Hull integrity at 78%. Recommend immediate landing for repairs." Simmons scanned the nearby celestial bodies, spotting a small, rocky moon within range. He angled the wounded shuttle toward its pockmarked surface, gritting his teeth as he fought against the unresponsive controls. The landing was rough, leaving a deep furrow in the moon's dusty surface. As the ship's systems stabilized, Simmons ran a more thorough diagnostic. The news wasn't good. Without replacement parts, the cloaking field would remain offline. Donning his exosuit, Simmons stepped out onto the alien landscape. His helmet lights illuminated a desolate, cratered surface stretching to the horizon. In the distance, an angular structure caught his eye, some kind of abandoned outpost. As Simmons approached the structure, a noise from behind made him spin around, weapon drawn. His jaw dropped as a familiar figure emerged from the shuttle's airlock. "Lyra," he gasped, "what the hell are you doing here?" The Ullian cultural attaché raised her hands in a placating gesture. "I couldn't let you face this alone, Samuel. There's too much at stake." Before Simmons could respond, movement near the outpost caught his attention. "Inside, now!" he hissed, ushering Lyra toward the alien structure. They slipped through a partially open doorway, finding themselves in a dim, dust-covered chamber. As Simmons's eyes adjusted, he realized they were surrounded by abandoned Ullian technology. "We need parts to repair the shuttle," he explained to Lyra. "Any idea what we're looking at here?" Lyra moved gracefully among the alien devices, her antennae twitching as she examined them. "This was a research outpost," she said. "Much of this equipment is outdated, but... wait." She approached a sealed door at the far end of the chamber, running her hands over its surface. With a series of clicks and chirps, the door slid open, revealing a hidden room beyond. Inside, they found a bank of softly glowing crystals. Lyra's compound eyes widened. "Data storage," she breathed. "But why hide it?" As Lyra interfaced with the alien technology, Simmons kept watch. His mind raced with questions about Lyra's presence and the potential consequences of her actions. "Samuel," Lyra's voice was tight with tension, You need to see this. The translated data scrolled across Simmons' helmet display. His blood ran cold as he absorbed the information. Schematics for a massive weapons platform, capable of destroying entire planets. This can't be right, he muttered. Your government agreed to disarmament after the last conflict. Lyra's antennae drooped. It seems the radical faction I warned you about has more influence than I realized. This changes everything. A sudden explosion rocked the outpost. Simmons whirled to see a squad of Ulian soldiers pouring through the entrance, led by a heavily armored figure. Intruders, the leader bellowed. Surrender or be destroyed. Simmons shoved Lyra behind a console as energy bolts sizzled through the air. He returned fire, his human-designed weapon leaving scorch marks on the Ulian soldiers' chitinous armor. We need to get back to the shuttle, he shouted to Lyra over the din of battle. Can you create a diversion? Lyra nodded, her eyes narrowing in concentration. Suddenly, the air shimmered with a dazzling display of light and color. The Ulian soldiers recoiled, their compound eyes overwhelmed by the sensory overload. Seizing the moment, Simmons grabbed Lyra's hand and ran. They sprinted across the lunar surface, energy bolts kicking up dust around them. The shuttle loomed ahead, its boarding ramp already lowering. As they cleared the ramp, Simmons felt a searing pain in his leg. He stumbled, nearly falling, but Lyra's surprisingly strong grip kept him upright. They collapsed into the cockpit as the ramp sealed behind them. Hold on, Simmons grunted, pushing through the pain to initiate the launch sequence. The shuttle rocketed skyward, shaking with the force of nearby explosions. Ulian fighters streaked after them as they broke atmosphere. Simmons's hands flew across the controls, pushing the damaged shuttle to its limits. He aimed for a dense asteroid field ahead, hoping to lose their pursuers in the chaos. Samuel, Lyra's voice was filled with worry. Your leg. Later, he cut her off, focusing on the treacherous path ahead. The shuttle dove and weaved between massive rocks, alarms blaring as they scraped past with mere inches to spare. Behind them, two Ulian fighters erupted into fireballs, unable to match Simmons's desperate maneuvers. The third broke off pursuit, unwilling to risk destruction. As they emerged from the asteroid field, Simmons allowed himself a moment of relief. It was short-lived. Incoming transmission, the shuttle's AI announced. Human military frequency. A familiar voice filled the cockpit. Unidentified shuttle, this is Sergeant Marcus Hayes. You are ordered to power down and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. Simmons exchanged a worried glance with Lyra. They'd escaped one danger only to fly directly into another. As Hayes's patrol ship loomed before them, Simmons realized their true challenge was only beginning to unfold. Simmons took a deep breath, his mind racing as he weighed their limited options. Lyra, he said, turning to his Ulian companion, I need you to hide. If they board us... She nodded, understanding the implications. As Lyra concealed herself in a small maintenance compartment, Simmons opened a channel to respond to Hayes. Sergeant Hayes, this is Private Simmons. I'm on a classified mission for Colonel Hawkins. Request immediate clearance to land at Zeta 9. There was a tense pause before Hayes' voice crackled back. Negative, Simmons. You're to power down and prepare for boarding. That's an order. Simmons gritted his teeth, knowing he had no choice. He initiated the power down sequence, watching as the patrol ship grew larger in the view screen. As the shuttle's systems went dark, he felt the familiar jostle of a tractor beam locking on. Minutes later, the airlock hissed open. Sergeant Hayes stepped in, flanked by two armed soldiers. His eyes narrowed as he took in Simmons's battered appearance and the shuttle's damaged interior. Where's your crew, Private? Hayes demanded, his weapon trained on Simmons. No crew, sir. Solo mission. Hayes snorted in disbelief. Right, and I suppose you inflicted all this damage on yourself? Search the shuttle, he barked to his men. Simmons held his breath as the soldiers methodically swept the small craft. When one approached the maintenance compartment, he tensed, ready to act. But the soldier passed it by, apparently fooled by Lyra's expert concealment. Clear, sir, the soldier reported. Hayes frowned, clearly unsatisfied. All right, Simmons, you're coming with us. Colonel Hawkins will sort this out. As they disembarked onto Zeta-9, Simmons was struck by the base's heightened state of alert. Armed patrols roamed the corridors, and the faces of passing personnel were etched with tension. Something had happened during his absence, something big. They were halfway to the command center when alarms blared throughout the base. Hayes's comm unit chirped urgently. "Sergeant," a panicked voice shouted, "we've got an Ullian signature in Hangar Bay 3, the shuttle Simmons came in on." Hayes whirled on Simmons, his face contorted with rage. "You brought one of them here?" Before Simmons could respond, a security team rushed past, heading for the hangar. In the confusion, Simmons spotted Lyra being roughly escorted down an adjacent corridor. "Wait!" he shouted, breaking away from Hayes. "She's not a threat!" But his protest fell on deaf ears, as he was tackled to the ground by Hayes's men. As they hauled him to his feet, Simmons caught a final glimpse of Lyra being led away, her alien features a mask of fear and confusion. The next few hours passed in a blur of interrogation rooms and accusatory voices. Simmons found himself facing a panel of stern-faced officers, with Colonel Hawkins at the center, his expression unreadable. "Private Simmons," Hawkins began, his voice cold, "you stand accused of treason, harboring an alien during a classified mission, compromising base security, and endangering human lives. How do you plead?" Simmons straightened, meeting Hawkins's gaze. "Not guilty, sir. I have critical information about an Ullian weapons platform capable of destroying entire planets. The Ullian with me, Lyra. She's an ally. She helped me obtain this data." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Hawkins leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his skepticism. "Show me," he ordered. As the evidence from the abandoned outpost scrolled across the room's main display, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Hawkins's frown deepened as he absorbed the implications of the schematics. "If this is accurate," he muttered, "it changes everything." Before Simmons could press his advantage, the door burst open. A breathless aide rushed in, his face pale. "Sir," he gasped, addressing Hawkins, "there's been an incident at the Alien diplomatic quarters. A group of our soldiers, they attacked. There are injuries, sir, and one alien fatality." The room erupted into chaos. As officers shouted and argued, Simmons felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The situation was spiraling out of control, threatening to ignite the very conflict they'd been trying to prevent. Hawkins silenced the room with a sharp gesture. His eyes locked onto Simmons, filled with a new intensity. "Private," he said, his voice low and urgent, "it seems your Ullian friend may be our best hope for salvaging this mess. You have one chance to prove your loyalty and prevent an interstellar war. Are you up for it?" Simmons nodded, persistence etched on his face. "Yes, sir. What do you need me to do?" "You and the Ullian, Lyra, will work together to expose this radical faction and stop this war before it starts. I'm assigning you a small team of trusted personnel." Hawkins paused, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Including Sergeant Hayes." Simmons couldn't hide his surprise. "Hayes, sir, but he is a damn good soldier who follows orders." Hawkins cut him off. "You'll need his skills, even if he doesn't like it." As Simmons was led out to begin preparations, his mind raced with the enormity of the task ahead. He and Lyra working together to save both their species from war. It seemed impossible, yet he felt a glimmer of hope. In a nearby holding cell, Lyra paced nervously, her antennae twitching with anxiety. When the door slid open to reveal Simmons, her compound eyes widened with relief. "Samuel," she breathed, "I feared the worst." As Simmons quickly explained their new mission, he was struck by Lyra's unwavering perseverance. Despite the danger and mistrust she'd faced, her tenacity to prevent conflict remained strong. "We can do this," she said, her alien features set in an expression Simmons was learning to read as confidence. "Together, we can show both our peoples the benefits of cooperation." Simmons nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him at her words. As they left the cell to meet their new team, he realized that their partnership, born of necessity and crisis, had grown into something deeper, something that might just be the key to saving both their worlds. The corridor ahead was filled with uncertain faces and potential danger. But as Simmons and Lyra walked side by side, their differences stark yet complementary, he felt a spark of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two beings united by a common goal and a growing bond that defied the boundaries of their species. Their partnership, forged in the crucible of crisis, would soon face its greatest test. The journey to the neutral space station was tense, filled with hushed strategy sessions and hurried preparations. As they approached the massive structure, its gleaming spires and interconnected modules stretching out before them, Simmons felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "Remember," he said to Lyra as they prepared to disembark, "we're a couple attending the tech conference. Stick to the cover story." Lyra's antenna twitched in acknowledgement. "I understand, Samuel. We've practiced this." As they stepped onto the bustling concourse, Simmons was struck by the diversity of species surrounding them. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and configurations moved through the space, a living kaleidoscope of interstellar life. Sergeant Hayes approached, his teeth gritted. "We'll split up here. Chen and I will focus on security protocols. You two, do your thing." Simmons nodded, noting the barely concealed disdain in Hayes' voice. As the sergeant stalked away, Lyra placed a hand on Simmons' arm. "He still doesn't trust me," she observed. "He'll come around," Simmons replied, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. "Come on, let's get to work." They made their way through the conference center, Simmons' arm draped casually over Lyra's shoulders. He was acutely aware of the curious glances thrown their way by other attendees. A human-alien couple was still a rarity, even in this cosmopolitan setting. As they navigated the crowded halls, Simmons found himself leaning into their cover story. He whispered observations in Lyra's ear, laughing at her quiet responses. What had started as an act began to feel surprisingly natural. Their easy companionship didn't go unnoticed. As they paused near a display of cutting-edge terraforming equipment, a tall, distinguished human approached them. "Fascinating, isn't it?" the man said, gesturing at the display. "The advancements in cross-species bioengineering are truly remarkable." He turned to Simmons, extending a hand. "Dr. Elias Blackwood, Xenobiology." Simmons shook the offered hand, recognizing the name from their mission briefing. "Samuel Connors," he replied, using his cover identity. "This is my partner, Lyra." Blackwood's eyes lit up with interest as he regarded Lyra. "Charmed," he said. "I must say it's refreshing to see such open collaboration between our species. Tell me, how did you two meet?" As Simmons spun their prepared backstory, he noticed Blackwood's keen attention to every detail. The scientist's questions grew increasingly pointed, probing the nature of their relationship and the challenges of human-alien communication. "Fascinating," Blackwood murmured, his gaze flicking between them. "And you found no insurmountable biological incompatibilities?" Simmons felt a flush creep up his neck. "We managed just fine," he said, forcing a laugh. "If you'll excuse us, Dr. Blackwood, we have a panel to attend." As they hurried away, Lyra leaned close. "He suspects something," she whispered. "Agreed," Simmons replied. "But he might lead us to the radical faction. Keep an eye on him." They spent the next few hours circulating through the conference, gathering snippets of information and making note of suspicious interactions. As the day wore on, Simmons found himself growing more comfortable with Lyra's presence at his side. Their practiced intimacy began to feel less like an act and more like a natural extension of their partnership. As the conference attendees filtered out for the evening, Lyra tugged on Simmons's sleeve. "I have an idea," she said, her compound eyes glinting with drive. "Meet me at the central atrium in an hour." Before Simmons could respond, she slipped away into the crowd. He spent the next hour circling back to check on the rest of their team, growing increasingly anxious as the minutes ticked by. When he arrived at the atrium, he found Lyra waiting, her antennae quivering with excitement. "I accessed the station's restricted areas," she said without preamble. "Samuel, I found something big." She quickly outlined her discovery, evidence of a massive arms deal between the Ullian radicals and human war profiteers. Simmons felt his stomach drop as he realized the extent of the conspiracy. "We need to tell the others," he began, but Lyra's sudden tension made him pause. "Samuel," she hissed, her eyes fixed on a point over his shoulder. "Don't turn around. It's Commander Zarek." Simmons felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the name of the Ulian hardliner they'd encountered on their previous mission. He sensed a presence behind him, heard the click of mandibles. "Well, well," came a gravelly voice. "What an unexpected pleasure. The human and his Ulian friend. Tell me, what brings you to this gathering of minds?" Simmons turned slowly, meeting the Ulian commander's suspicious gaze. "Just here for the conference," he said, forcing a smile, "like everyone else." Zarek's compound eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Strange, I don't recall seeing your names on the official attendance list." As Zarek continued to press them, questioning their credentials and motives, Simmons felt sweat beating on his forehead. He glanced at Lyra, seeing his own tension mirrored in her stance. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the atrium's entrance. Simmons turned to see Sergeant Hayes bursting into the space, flanked by human security officers. "There!" Hayes shouted, pointing at Zarek. "The Ulian was threatening them." In the chaos that followed, as security forces from multiple species converged on the scene, Simmons felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The situation was spiraling out of control, threatening to unravel their entire mission. As alarms began to blare throughout the station, Simmons' comm unit chirped with an incoming transmission. The message that scrolled across his display made his blood run cold. "Imminent attack on station. Joint human-Ulian extremist force. Weapons platform prototype on board. Prevent at all costs. Hawkins." Simmons locked eyes with Lyra, seeing his own tenacity reflected in her alien features. They had come too far to fail now. As security forces swarmed around them and the station descended into chaos, they knew their true test was only beginning. As security forces swarmed around them and the station descended into chaos, Simmons knew their true test was only just beginning. "Lyra, we need to move," he whispered urgently. "The weapons platform prototype. It's here on the station." Her antennae twitched in surprise. "How do you know?" "Hawkins, we have to secure it before the extremists do." Without hesitation, they slipped away from the commotion, using the panic as cover. Simmons' military training kicked in as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the station. He moved with purpose, every sense on high alert. They encountered their first obstacle at a security checkpoint. 2 guards, 1 human, and 1 Ulian, stood vigilant. "I've got this," Lyra murmured. She stepped forward, her alien features arranged in an expression of distress. "Please, you must help. There's been an attack in Section 7G. As the guards turned to their communication panels to verify, Simmons struck. 2 swift, precise blows, and both guards crumpled silently to the floor. "Nicely done," Lyra remarked, already working on bypassing the security lock. They pressed on, deeper into the restricted areas of the station. Alarms blared intermittently, adding to the sense of urgency. Simmons felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. If they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Finally, they reached a nondescript door at the end of a narrow corridor. Lyra's eyes widened as she scanned the security measures. "This is it," she breathed. "The prototype must be behind this door." Simmons nodded grimly. "Can you get us in?" Lyra's fingers flew over the control panel, her multifaceted eyes processing information at an incredible speed. "It's complex, but yes, I can do it." As she worked, Simmons kept watch. The distant sounds of conflict grew louder. Time was running out. With a soft hiss, the door slid open. They rushed inside, finding themselves in a cavernous docking bay. And there it was, the Ulian weapons platform prototype. It loomed before them, a sleek, otherworldly construct of technology beyond Simmons' comprehension. "Incredible," Lyra whispered, her antennae quivering with a mix of awe and trepidation. They sprinted towards the platform, acutely aware of their vulnerability in the open space. As they reached it, the docking bay doors began to open. "They're here," Simmons growled. "We need to power this thing up now." They climbed aboard, Lyra immediately interfacing with the alien controls. Simmons took up a defensive position, his weapon at the ready. The first wave of attackers burst into the bay, a mix of human and Ulian extremists. Simmons opened fire, forcing them to take cover, but he knew they couldn't hold out for long. "Lyra, how much longer?" "Almost there," she called back, her voice strained with concentration. "The systems are coming online, but Samuel, look out." Simmons spun, narrowly avoiding a blast of energy that scorched the platform where he'd been standing. He returned fire, taking down the Ulian extremist who'd nearly killed him. Suddenly, the weapons platform hummed to life. Displays flickered on, bathing them in an eerie, pulsating light. "I've got it," Lyra exclaimed. "We have control." Simmons joined her at the main console, marveling at the array of information flooding the screens. The platform's sensors revealed the full scope of the conflict raging throughout the station and beyond. "Look," Lyra pointed, her voice tight. "That ship, it's coordinating the attack." Simmons leaned in, his eyes widening as he recognized a familiar face on the communication feed. "Dr. Blackwood, he's with them." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The charming xenobiologist they'd met earlier was at the heart of this conspiracy. "We need to expose them," Simmons said, his mind focused. "All of them." Lyra nodded, her fingers already dancing across the controls. "I can use the platform's communication array to broadcast everything we're seeing. Both our governments will receive it simultaneously." As Lyra worked, Simmons used the platform's non-lethal capabilities to target the attacker's ships. Energy pulses lashed out, disabling key systems and sowing confusion among the extremist forces. The broadcast went out, and the effect was immediate. The attacking forces faltered, their coordinated assault dissolving into chaos as the truth of their manipulation came to light. But their victory was short-lived. Both the retreating extremists and suspicious allied forces turned their attention to the weapons platform. "We need to move," Simmons shouted as the first volley of fire rocked the platform. Lyra took the controls, maneuvering the massive construct with surprising grace. They weaved through the debris-filled space around the station, energy blasts sizzling past them on all sides. In the midst of the fray, Simmons found himself standing close to Lyra, their bodies pressed together as they worked in perfect synchronization. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the alien features to the person beneath, brave, brilliant, and beautiful in her own unique way. Lyra met his gaze, her compound eyes reflecting the swirling chaos around them. For a moment, the battle faded away. Simmons leaned in, driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, and kissed her. The kiss was unlike anything he'd experienced. Alien, yes, but also deeply, profoundly right. When they parted, Lyra's antennae quivered with an emotion Simmons couldn't quite name. The moment shattered as a massive ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel nearby. Simmons tensed, ready for a new threat, but the communication panel crackled to life. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the human fleet," a stern voice announced. "We've received your broadcast and are here to assist. Weapons platform, identify yourself." Simmons exhaled in relief. "Captain Vasquez, this is Private Samuel Simmons. I'm here with Lyra, an Ulian ally. We've secured the weapons platform and have critical intelligence on the extremist plot." There was a pause, then, "Understood, Private. We're dispatching a shuttle to bring you aboard. Well done, both of you." As they docked with Vasquez's ship, Simmons and Lyra exchanged a look of mingled relief and apprehension. They had prevented a war, but the fallout from their actions was yet to come. Simmons's comm unit chirped. Colonel Hawkins's face appeared on the small screen, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "You've done good work, Private," Hawkins said, "but be prepared. You and Lyra will face intense scrutiny from both sides. This isn't over yet." As they stepped off the weapons platform onto the deck of Vasquez's ship, Simmons felt the weight of what lay ahead. But with Lyra by his side, he knew they could face whatever challenges came their way. The future of human-Ulian relations hung in the balance, and they were at the center of it all. Their journey, it seemed, was only just beginning. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. As Vasquez's ship approached Earth, Simmons felt a knot of tension forming in his stomach. The familiar blue orb loomed before them, a sight he once associated with homecoming. Now it represented an uncertain future. "We're entering Earth's atmosphere," Captain Vasquez announced over the intercom. "Prepare for landing." Simmons turned to Lyra, who stood beside him at the viewport. Her antennae twitched nervously, and he resisted the urge to reach out and touch her. Their relationship, once a cover story, had become something real and profound. But how would it be received by the tribunal? The ship touched down with a gentle thud. As the ramp lowered, Simmons took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Lyra mimicked the gesture, a habit she'd picked up from him during their time together. They stepped out into the harsh sunlight, flanked by Vasquez and a security detail. The specially constructed neutral facility loomed before them, a massive structure of gleaming metal and tinted glass. Its architecture was a blend of human and alien design, a physical representation of the unprecedented cooperation their case had sparked. As they approached the entrance, Simmons became acutely aware of the crowds gathered beyond the security perimeter. Humans and aliens stood side by side, some holding signs of support, others shouting angry slogans. The air crackled with tension and excitement. Inside the facility, they were ushered through a series of security checkpoints. Each scan and pat-down served as a reminder of the gravity of their situation. Finally, they arrived at the antechamber of the tribunal room. "Remember," Vasquez said, her voice low and serious, "stick to the facts. Don't let them bait you into speculation or emotional responses." Simmons nodded, grateful for her steady presence. He glanced at Lyra, seeing his own mix of grit and apprehension reflected in her compound eyes. The doors swung open, revealing the tribunal chamber. It was a vast, circular room, dominated by a raised dais where the judges sat, an equal mix of humans and aliens. The gallery was packed with observers, their hushed whispers creating a constant low-level hum. As Simmons and Lyra took their seats at the center of the room, he felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. The lead judge, a stern-looking human woman, called the tribunal to order. "We are here to examine the actions of Private Samuel Simmons and Lyra of Clan Zexath," she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Their unauthorized mission has brought to light a conspiracy that threatened the peace between our species. However, the methods they employed and the nature of their partnership raised serious questions." The proceedings began in earnest. Simmons and Lyra presented their evidence, recounting the events that had led them to uncover the plot. As they spoke, Simmons noticed the judge's reactions: surprise, skepticism, and occasionally grudging respect. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably when Dr. Elias Blackwood was brought in to testify. The once charming xenobiologist now looked haggard and defeated. His testimony, detailing the extent of the radical faction's plans, sent shockwaves through the assembly. "We believe that conflict between our species was inevitable," Blackwood said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We sought to control that conflict, to shape it to our advantage." As the days wore on, Simmons found himself under increasing scrutiny. The tribunal's focus shifted from the conspiracy to his relationship with Lyra. He endured hours of questioning about the nature of their bond, struggling to put into words something he himself didn't fully understand. The arrival of Dr. Miranda Evans, the xenobiologist tasked with examining them, brought a new layer of complexity to the proceedings. Her findings sent ripples of astonishment through the tribunal. The prolonged close contact between Private Simmons and Lyra has triggered unprecedented physiological changes in both subjects, Dr. Evans reported, her excitement nearly unleashed. "We're seeing cellular adaptations that suggest a level of biological compatibility previously thought impossible between humans and aliens." The revelation sparked intense debate. Some saw it as a promising sign for future cooperation, while others viewed it with suspicion and fear. Simmons and Lyra found themselves at the center of a storm of scientific and ethical questions. Outside the tribunal, tensions continued to rise. News feeds showed images of protests erupting in major cities on both Earth and Ulian worlds. The tribunal facility itself became a focal point, with crowds of supporters and detractors growing larger each day. The arrival of Admiral Viktor Volkov threatened to derail the entire proceedings. The hardline military leader presented evidence of ongoing Ullian military activities near contested territories, his testimony rekindling old suspicions and resentments. "We cannot allow ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security," Volkov argued, his voice ringing with conviction. "The Ullian threat remains real and present." Simmons felt his heart sink as he watched the judge's reactions. All the progress they had made seemed to be slipping away, but then, in a surprising turn of events, Xenos, the Ullian diplomat from Zeta-9, made an unexpected appearance. "Admiral Volkov's claims are based on outdated intelligence and fear-mongering," Xenos stated, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Volkov's fiery rhetoric. "The actions of Private Simmons and Lyra have opened our eyes to the possibility of true cooperation. We must not squander this opportunity." As the tribunal neared its conclusion, Simmons and Lyra found unexpected support from Colonel Hawkins. Fully recovered from the assassination attempt, Hawkins worked tirelessly behind the scenes, meeting with influential moderates from both species. The final day of the tribunal dawned with a sense of nervous anticipation. As Simmons and Lyra entered the chamber, the air felt charged with possibility. But before the judges could deliver their verdict, alarms blared throughout the facility. "We're under attack," Captain Vasquez's voice cut through the chaos. "Radical extremists have breached the outer defenses." Without hesitation, Simmons and Lyra sprang into action. They coordinated with Vasquez, organizing a joint human-alien defense force. As they fought side by side to repel the attackers, Simmons was struck by how naturally they worked together, their different physiologies and tactics complementing each other perfectly. In the aftermath of the attack, as the dust settled and the last of the extremists were rounded up, Simmons and Lyra stood before the tribunal once more. The judges' expressions had changed, a new respect evident in their eyes. The lead judge cleared her throat, silencing the murmurs that filled the chamber. "In light of recent events and the evidence presented, this tribunal has reached a decision." Simmons held his breath, acutely aware of Lyra's presence beside him. Whatever the verdict, he knew their lives would never be the same. The lead judge's voice rang out with finality. "This tribunal finds Private Samuel Simmons and Lyra of Clan Zexath not guilty of any wrongdoing. Furthermore, we commend their actions in uncovering and thwarting the extremist plot. In light of the unprecedented physiological changes observed in both subjects, we hereby authorize the establishment of an experimental human-alien integration program." Simmons exhaled, relief washing over him. Beside him, Lyra's antennae quivered with excitement. They exchanged a quick glance, both realizing that this verdict wasn't just an ending, but a new beginning. As the tribunal chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, Captain Vasquez approached them. "Congratulations," she said, her stern expression softening. "You two have been selected to spearhead the integration program on Nova Concordia." Simmons blinked, processing the information. "Nova Concordia?" "A joint colony world," Vasquez explained. "It's been in the planning stages for months, but your case has accelerated its implementation. You'll be leaving in 2 weeks." The next fortnight passed in a blur of preparations and briefings. Before Simmons knew it, he and Lyra were boarding a transport ship bound for their new home. As they entered faster-than-light travel, Lyra pressed her face against the viewport, her compound eyes reflecting the streaking stars. "I never imagined I'd be traveling to a new world with a human," she said softly. Simmons smiled, placing his hand on her shoulder. "I never imagined I'd be in love with an Ullian." The journey to Nova Concordia took 3 days. When they finally dropped out of FTL, Simmons gasped. The planet below was a vibrant swirl of blues, greens, and purples, a perfect blend of Earth-like and alien features. As their ship began its descent, the colony came into view. It was a marvel of architecture, seamlessly integrating human and Ullian design elements. Towering spires of iridescent material stood alongside sturdy concrete structures, while vast biodomes housed hybrid ecosystems. They touched down on a landing pad at the heart of the colony. As the ramp lowered, Simmons took a deep breath, savoring the alien yet oddly familiar scent of their new home. He and Lyra stepped out, hand in hand, into the warm sunlight of Nova Concordia. A diverse crowd had gathered to welcome them. Humans and aliens standing side by side, their differences highlighted yet somehow diminished by their shared excitement. At the forefront stood a familiar face, Dr. Miranda Evans, the xenobiologist who had examined them on Earth. "Welcome to Nova Concordia," Dr. Evans greeted them warmly. "We have so much to show you, but first we need to conduct some tests. The changes in your physiology are progressing at an astonishing rate." Over the next few hours, Simmons and Lyra underwent a battery of examinations. As Dr. Evans reviewed the results, her eyes widened with each passing moment. "This is remarkable," she breathed. "Samuel, your sensory perception has increased tenfold since our last examination. And Lyra, your musculoskeletal structure is showing increased density and resilience, more akin to human physiology." Simmons flexed his hand, suddenly aware of the heightened sensitivity in his fingertips. He could feel the subtle variations in the air currents, the minute vibrations from the colony's power generators. Beside him, Lyra stood taller, her movements more fluid and powerful than before. "What does this mean for us?" Lyra asked, her antennae twitching with curiosity. Dr. Evans smiled. "It means you're perfect for your new roles here. Samuel, we'd like you to organize and train a joint human-alien security force. Lyra, your diplomatic skills will be crucial in mediating cultural misunderstandings among the colonists." As the weeks passed, Simmons and Lyra threw themselves into their new responsibilities. Simmons found that his enhanced senses gave him a unique advantage in training the security force, allowing him to demonstrate techniques that bridge the gap between human and alien capabilities. Lyra, meanwhile, became the heart of the colony. Her natural empathy, combined with her deepening understanding of human nature, made her an invaluable mediator. She deftly navigated the complex web of cultural differences, turning potential conflicts into opportunities for greater understanding. Their personal relationship deepened as well. In the privacy of their shared living quarters, a spacious apartment that blended human comfort with alien aesthetics, they explored the new sensations and emotions brought on by their changing physiology. One evening, as they stood on their balcony overlooking the thriving colony, Simmons turned to Lyra. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I asked that question on Zeta 9. Lyra's antennae brushed against his cheek in a gesture of affection. "As am I, Samuel. As am I." As the first year on Nova Concordia drew to a close, the colony had become a shining example of interspecies cooperation. News of their success spread, attracting attention from both Earth and Ulian homeworlds. Delegations arrived to study the integration model, including some familiar faces. Sergeant Marcus Hayes, once known for his xenophobic views, stood at the spaceport, his jaw slack as he took in the sight of humans and aliens working side by side. Simmons approached him, extending a hand in greeting. "Welcome to Nova Concordia, Sergeant," he said, noting the conflicting emotions playing across Hayes' face. Hayes shook his hand hesitantly. I don't know what to say, Simmons. This isn't anything like what I expected." Simmons smiled. "Why don't you let me show you around? I think you'll find that we have more in common with the Ulians than you might believe." As they walked through the colony, Simmons couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Nova Concordia was more than just a success. It was a glimpse into a future where humans and aliens could coexist in harmony. And he and Lyra were at the center of it all, their unlikely partnership blazing a trail for others to follow.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.